2026 sees me travel the length and breadth of England to run a marathon per week in each of its 39 historic counties. Why? To raise funds for Tommy's, the charity that does incredible work to try to end the heartbreak of baby loss. I will be joined each week by someone who has their own story of loss, their own rollercoaster journey, their own reason to be there. This podcast shares those stories in the hope that they can bring awareness to an often undiscussed topic and even, perhaps, a flicker of light in someone's darkness. You can follow the runs, the stories, and donate to the cause at marathonsformiracles.com. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to another episode of Marathons for Miracles. Joined this week by Alice. Hi, Alice.
Hi, Olly.
Alice is joining us on the Dorset leg, and I feel like Alice and I are best mates these days. Alice was very, very early involved in the challenge. Saw us on Instagram.
Yeah, sure did.
At quite an early point in our sort of recruitment process, and has been a massive support throughout in sort of sharing our story and just being brilliant and being very enthusiastic about what we're doing. So, sporting your Tommy's t-shirt.
I
Excellent.
am, like I said, I'm on brand today.
On brand, absolutely.
Yeah. Although this is a podcast, so I'm wearing a pink top with Tommy's across it.
Yeah. And as we'll learn throughout the conversation, Alice has sort of done a lot of work with Tommy's over the past few years as well. So we'll get into that as we go. We're on to week 14 now. Yeah, sort of. Can I say almost halfway at this point? Let's say almost halfway.
Almost. If that makes you feel better, Olly, let's say almost.
It's good because we're actually recording this. I think we're about to do week 10. To be recording week 14 gives me a bit of hope. Like we're moving through. So it's great to have you on, Alice. And I know you've from having spoken to you before, you've got quite the story to tell, but some great insights for anyone listening, and a really valuable perspective on all of this. I will begin in the usual fashion and ask, how did you end up being involved with Marathons for Miracles? What led you to this point?
Okay, so 10 years ago, I was lucky enough to meet my amazing partner, Nick, and I quite clearly remember, because I was in my early 30s at the time, going for a walk and kind of having asking him two things. One was a statement and one was a question. The statement was, I'm not living in Taunton. Sorry to anyone who was... And that's where he was based at the time and where he grew up. So yeah, apologies to anyone in Somerset, but I'm a Dorset girl. So that was the statement. And the second thing was the question, which is, would you like to have a family? And I asked it because I think I felt we were meeting slightly kind of later in life compared to a lot of my friends who were already married and some with children already. And I just knew that he was the person that I potentially wanted to start a family with. So, and the answer was yes and yes. So I got my Dorset dream, and eventually he moved across the border. And then in 2018, we decided to start to try for the family that we talked about. So it was taking a while. And we crossed into a new year, into 2019, and it still wasn't happening. So I decided to go to the doctors, to the local GP, and was kind of pushed away because I was under 35 at that point, and you have to be trying for a year on the NHS or in our local primary care trust at the moment to be able to have any further conversation or any further testing for that. So I was like, okay. So just on that year, we fell pregnant, which was hugely exciting. And yes, I do remember the morning when we took the pregnancy test. And that was great. So we kind of entered into that scenario, hopes, dreams, building a family, waiting nearly a year to do so. So it was kind of, a relief, I suppose, seeing those two lines. And then sadly I ended up experiencing some bleeding went to the early pregnancy unit and was diagnosed with a missed miscarriage. So at the time, I was just under 12 weeks, about 11 weeks, and they thought the baby was measuring about 7. So my body hadn't decided that it wanted to miscarry at the time, so I'd been carrying that. The process started, so I miscarried naturally and didn't have to have any medical intervention, which was, when you shouldn't say that's a blessing in disguise, but you look for small things when you do experience this. So absolutely devastated. And then thought we'll still carry on. But then it was fast forward into another year, 2020, pandemic hit. Obviously that didn't, gave us a bit more time, should we say, to try and start a family. And we fell pregnant again just under that year mark of what the NHS say about kind of needing further testing. But sadly, that also ended in a miscarriage. And due to it being on the dot of around 6 weeks and still in the summertime, still in the depths of, the pandemic, I was basically told not to go in to hospital and was kind of really diagnosed by a phone call, and then had to just carry on with text messages via my doctor as well. So again, the silver lining, if there's any in that, was the fact that I'd experienced before. So I trusted my body to do what it needed to do. And then we carried on. Fast forward into another year, 2021. So this time it feels like the years are stacking up now. This is kind of from 2018 into 2021. Well, we saw the 2 positive lines again. And sadly, that also ended up in another miscarriage. Now, this is something that I'm sure we'll discuss later on. This is particularly in the UK with the NHS. This is when I hit the 3 miscarriages. So it kind of cracked open this opportunity to have more testing available. So I was kind of like, okay, we've got to that stage now. So that's when I was invited down to the local GP, and we started some regular routine blood tests, and nothing conclusive really came back from that. So we carried on trying. I changed jobs in this period, which is another thing I'd like to touch on later on about careers and fertility as well. And everyone said that the usual thing, I bet you it will happen, it will happen straight away. 3 or 4 months into my new job, early 2022 now, I fell pregnant again. And I was like, this is it. This is going to happen now. And I remember tentatively the second and the third feeling kind of quite worried about it. But for some reason, I was so into this one. I was like, it's happened 3 times. It's not going to happen. And was like totally elated by it, or we were, sorry, it's never I, it's always we. And then it happened again. Unfortunately, my body told me it was happening by bleeding. It happened, and I was like, still remember like how devastated. I was devastated with all of them, but like really devastated with this one. And then I was like, we've got to do something about this. So this is where Tommy's really came into my life, and I phoned the midwife support line, and I spoke, and I still talk about her. I think she still works for Tommy's. Big shout out to Sophie still. She will always be remembered for me. It was so patient, so calm, and literally described to me, took me to their website, and on their website, which is really useful, they have a list of tests that you're entitled to. And she was like, print this off, walk into your doctor's surgery and basically slam it on the table and say, this is what I need. This is what we're doing. And I really want to say this, and I hope people are listening who sadly may be in this recurrent loss situation as well. Please do that, because it was empowering to me to know what exactly, for the first time ever, I knew what I was asking for as well. So I did it. Thank you, Sophie. I walked in, slammed it on the table. I couldn't be referred to Tommy's, sadly, due to our primary care trust actually already having a recurrent miscarriage specialist unit classed at our hospital. So this is where it gets particularly medical, where you have to have a drop-down box come in. And he was like, the drop-down box isn't coming. And I was like, okay, what is in the drop-down box? So it was my county hospital. I got referred to a consultant there. And again, so that's where this kind of list came in, blood tests started to happen. We were just on the cusp of actually getting what they call a karyotyping blood test, which actually looks into the male and the female's chromosomes and DNA. And this is where a slightly comical story happens, because my partner, Nick, isn't a fan of blood tests. So we were there in hospital. He went to have his blood test and ended up fainting and having a fit. So he ended up in A&E, while I still had to go back the next that afternoon for an internal examination. So it was an incredibly stressful day, layered on top of everything else, that he ended up with 6 hours in A&E. I'm sorry, Nick, for sharing the story, but it does a moment of joy, because we do remember it, that I ended up having to drive him home, then having to drive back to the hospital for my internal examination. And it was just like this big thing where it's just you know, I loved him, but I was like, why then? Anyway.
Yeah, Nick.
Oh, Nick. So that happened, and we were like, okay, that might give us more conclusive answer. And then what happened was it was inconclusive, not because of Nick fainting, but because they also wanted to test some of what they call pregnancy-related products, sadly. Language is another thing we can touch on later on. To test against, which I didn't have. So fast forward again, that was 2022, so we were going through testing and we weren't conceiving. I was over 35 now. 18 months afterwards, with no conclusive answers that could be put forward for IVF on the NHS. Again, within my primary care trust, you have to wait 2 years, which is generally across the UK as well. So we were put forward for that. In the meantime, in 2023, that's when my fundraising started with Tommy's, and I ran the London Marathon. So that was kind of a little, I wouldn't say a rest because of, as I know, going through the training now, but it was something really positive. And when I started to really publicly share our story, because I felt it was really important. 2024, early 2024, got signed off. Our process started in April.
Signed off to begin IVF.
Yeah, signed off by the NHS to begin IVF. So anyone who has experienced will know this, but what happens, well, again, I have to talk very kind of carefully. Within our primary care trust, we were given 3 options, 3 IVF clinics we could choose from, all of which were quite far away physically, like logistically for us. We actually chose a clinic which was about approximately 2 hours away. It was the closest, and a friend had had really positive experience there, so that gave me confidence as well. So, but on top of that, the reason it took a bit longer is that you have to have, the woman, has to have another internal examination called a HICOSI, which I couldn't get on the NHS because they were only offering it once a month, and then the consultant that was doing it was off that month. So I ended up deciding to pay for it privately to speed the process along. Mm-hmm. This is not me having a go at the options that we were given by the NHS. This is just me trying to explain that there's so many hurdles still in the way.
Yeah.
So many layers that you have to go through, and particularly around the conversation of IVF. It's like, great, you're doing IVF, and I got a lot of that reaction. How exciting, how's that? But to even get there, and there's it's still, even with the NHS, there was still quite a lot of finances involved that had to kind of get us to that. So did that. We started the process, and bearing in mind, I'm bringing age into it just to give a bit of reality to it. So I had my embryo transfer just a week before my 40th birthday. So we ended up, and I'm quite happy to be open about this. I say only 5 eggs. That is quite low on an egg retrieval. 3 of which fertilised. 1 unfortunately didn't mature. two did, then we found out after my embryo transfer, they were just keeping one more overnight to see if it would go, but it didn't. So we called it lucky ducky in the end. We ended up having one egg. And there was one, we were only allowed one live transfer and one frozen transfer being paid for from the NHS. Now, I didn't have any embryos to freeze, so we knew that this was our chance, should we say. Went away, this dreaded 2-week wait. Again, maybe another conversation that we'll get into. Celebrated my 40th birthday in the Isle of Wight, just Nick and I. It was so wonderful. It really, for the first time in that awful 2-week wait period where I was just like, okay, completely relaxed. But in the meantime, I actually got back from the holiday and decided to interview for another job when I still hadn't found out my results. Went for an interview, and then I got back and I was like, I really want the job and I really want to be pregnant. And this is like two things in my life that don't generally easily combine. Found out I was pregnant and then found out I was offered the job. And I was like, okay, we'll get back to the job story later, but sadly, well, not sadly, we were pregnant, we were elated, and similarly to my last pregnancy, super excited. You know, all I wanted to do was eat chips. I mean, I want to do that anyway, but I really wanted to eat chips.
Yeah. Amy was a bread girl. Toast, just endless toast.
White toast, please, with lots of butter. Got offered the job, decided to take the job, and I had to be very honest with my new boss what had happened. She was incredibly supportive, and she was just like, I would be so lucky to have you for 6 months, so come on board, you know, it's going to be great. Resigned from my work, and then in between my resignation period, I went for you have a follow-up scan with the IVF clinic, 8-9 weeks, and was in the room and heard the dreaded words, there's no heartbeat. So anyone who's experienced that will realise that silence is so deafening. It's just like awful. So that happened, but my body didn't really want to let go of the pregnancy. So I had another couple of weeks while I was working out my resignation. And then I was just about to get medical intervention, and then my body kicked into action, and I decided, you know, to let go of the pregnancy naturally. And I put back my start date and gave myself probably not enough, a little bit of time. And that is where, it's not where our journeys ended, but that's where my pregnancy losses ended in kind of 2024. As we had follow-up appointments with the clinic, it was actually Nick who talked and remembered again about this chirotyping blood test, because they were giving us other options about what we could do going forward and different treatment plans, and talking about genetic testing on our embryos before they get, before the transfers again. And it was like, what about, we remembered we were meant to do this test, and the consultant was like, okay, yeah, this costs X amount of money. And we were like, we may as well do it before we actually get to the point, because then we know it just cancels out any kind of not misunderstanding, but gives us knowledge. So we decided to do that test. Sorry, just hopping back to my miscarriage. That one was also particularly a long miscarriage as well. It unfortunately just continued throughout the summer for me. So from about April 2024 to September 2024, I was either going through IVF treatment on hormones or pregnant and then having a miscarriage. So it was a very kind of extended process. We decided to go for this test privately and not go back to the NHS and do it. So we did it. It was a blood test. Nick didn't faint, everyone, by the way. And what came back from that is that I'm a balanced translocation chromosome carrier.
Okay.
Now, what that means is a healthy person will have 23 pairs of chromosomes. They come in 2 strands. My chromosome 16 and chromosome 20 have a strand that is swapped. Now, what that means for me is no health implications at all. But sadly, what that means for me trying to reproduce them in my eggs, that holds an abnormality and generally what causes miscarriage. Now, this isn't the answer. We're putting the assumption together that after many losses, that the eggs that were fertilized, unfortunately, were carrying this abnormality, and nature decided that it wasn't best to progress the pregnancy. Now, there's so many, and as you've used the word before, layers to fertility, infertility, that this is based on one set of results from a blood test, but most likely is the answer. Yeah. What the consultants can't tell me is how many of my eggs are affected. Could be 5%, could be 100%.
Yeah.
So with that, that gave us some really good knowledge in regards to what our future could be, or the future experience of our fertility could be. And I had some genetic counselling, which was provided by the IVF clinic, which was great. And just understanding options about that. We were given options of egg donors, genetic testing, carrying on naturally as well. So all of these options laid out in front of us. And to be honest, I was just absolutely knackered. We'd looked at a 7-year period of our lives. And I just said to Nick, you know what, I just need a break. I just don't want to do this anymore. So last year, 2025, was all about actually, we're bold enough to say we're having a year off. Yeah. And bearing in mind, I was turning 41 last year. And I know age shouldn't come into it, but it does with the female fertility more so. So we've had lots of conversations and played around with it, lots about actually potentially moving and now being not childless by circumstance, but moving towards childless by choice, and what that life looks like and how fulfilling that also can be, and what parenthood to me looks like or to us in different ways.
But still not moving to Taunton.
Still not moving to Taunton. Luckily, I managed to get him to persuade him to buy a house with me. So
when you said moving, I thought this was the big bombshell bit.
So what the big bombshell? And we're moving back to Taunton. No, moving towards what life could look like without having our own children, or what people stereotypically perceive as a family, and what life can look like. And obviously now we're now in 2026. I came across your channel late last year, and instantly was like, I'm in, because I'm a true believer of not only what Tommies actually do, the research and the support that they offer as a charity, but it's about, and one thing you always say, Olly, it's about awareness and advocating. It's something that I feel, hopefully by sharing a few things that have happened to us, may just help that person in the future. And if it helps one, that is what I'm happy about. So yeah, so that is 8 years share with everyone, of where where we started to how we've got to now.
Yeah.
There was some laughs in between that though as well.
There is so much to unpack, Alice, with your story, and I've listened to it in a longer format than that, and in lots of details, and we can perhaps point people in that direction in the show notes as well, to a fantastic interview that you did with Healing After Infant Loss on YouTube with Rosie. The one thing I have to say initially is with you have obviously become quite adept at telling the story and running through the process, and in the way we've done that there in 8 years and 15 minutes, almost sort of skip over those miscarriages. And I just want to say I'm really sorry that you've been through that. I had to do it once, and it was the worst week and subsequent few months of my life by a stretch. And I don't want to diminish those moments by sort of packaging them up, if you like, into a bigger story. I don't want that to be the impression for a second. Like as you said, each one was different, and some that the fourth one that you mentioned, sort of perhaps the most devastating because of your mindset going into it, but they're all in themselves really heartbreaking moments. So I just want to say sorry, and don't want to sort of move past them, if you know what I mean.
I really appreciate that, and Like you said, I have become a little bit adept at telling my story, but that doesn't take away the devastation and all the tears and the emotion. You know, it's been a process because, like we talked about, it's been over time. So I've had amazing support around me. I feel like I want to share it, so I've learned how to talk about it, but it will still catch me at different points. It's been a journey, and it still will be. It still will be. But, you know, I think talking about it is probably part of how I'm healing as well. And again, everyone is very different. I would never force anyone to share or to discuss, you know, their fertility story if they weren't in a position to do so.
Yeah.
For me, it's been important. And going back to that thing, if it helps one person, I suppose for me, that gives me a bit of joy knowing that that's been helpful as well.
Yeah. And I think it really, one thing that's happened throughout the challenge and recording these podcasts, which has sort of validated that for me, is that we have a couple of people within the group who had initially said that they didn't want to do a podcast.
Okay.
Which is completely fine. Like, we've not, everyone, is this a disclaimer I need to put out? Everyone is of their own free will. But there are a few who were reluctant to do so, or said that they didn't want to, and have subsequently listened to some of the other podcast episodes and said, actually, it's been so helpful to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would help me to talk about what I've been through. And again, because I got something from someone else talking about their story, I feel it's not my duty, but, you know, they're hopeful that they can have the same effect on someone else.
Yeah, I think that's sort of it. And I would also, it's a word that me and my friends have been talking about quite a lot recently, is courage. And I think it takes a lot of courage to share these details. It's not done lightly, you know, and I know that I have an Instagram channel where I do share quite a lot publicly, but also that's done with thought and consideration. And I think courage to everyone in the Marathon for Miracles team, or anyone who decides to share their story, it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do that. So respect, and it's, you know, I do really respect every time I read someone's story. I think that's probably taken them an awful lot to do, and how wonderful it is that they've done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots to unpack, and we could probably talk for hours, but there's a few bits in particular that I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
And I know you sort of links into a lot of the stuff that you're doing now. Firstly, the miscarriage sort of investigations.
Yes.
Shout out to Tommy's, who were clearly instrumental in sort of pushing that process forward for you with that list of tests. And I think this is one thing I often say about Tommy's, is that you don't necessarily need to be a patient at the recurrent miscarriage clinic for them to be incredibly useful and a fantastic resource. Of course, none of the resources are free. Tommy's have to pay for them all. So please, if you're listening, www.marathonsmiracles.com and click on the big pink donate now button. There's sort of two sides to it. The 3 miscarriage rule within the NHS, I'd sort of like to talk about that a little bit and get your thoughts on that. And then obviously from your investigations, you did have the cryotyping.
Cryotyping. I remembered it eventually myself as well.
Test, which then did give you, whilst, as you say, not necessarily a 100% answer as to what's like, perhaps a fairly good indicator. But that came
very
quite late on in your process. So how do you reflect on both that 3 miscarriage rule, for want of a better word?
Yep.
Sort of how long it has taken for you to get that answer.
Yeah. Okay, so 3 miscarriage rule, shall we say? I think, from my experience personally, Ollie, felt like I got stuck in a bit of a trap because of my age and because of the 3 miscarriage rule. So what was happening is, when I crossed the barrier into being 35, where they lower the limit, kind of like if you've been trying for 6 months, or if you... So what was happening is that every time I was trying to get some more investigations, even after 1 or 2, it was like, No. So the first two were, I think, pre-35. So you had to wait another year. And then I was just on that year pregnant, which was obviously an amazing thing to happen, but the timing of that just didn't quite work out. So I spent many years feeling like I was in a slight cycle trap of the rules of testing, which was kind of slightly frustrating. And then it felt a slight relief when I had the third, because I was like, at least I fit into a bracket now.
Yeah.
That gave me the confidence to fit into a something solid that I could go for. And actually,
it doesn't surprise me that you use that word relief.
Doesn't it? Okay.
The other word that we hear a lot is lucky. Like people say how lucky they feel because it wasn't this or it wasn't, you know, and how that's actually quite a strange word to
use
bring
to
into this conversation.
Yeah.
But I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, so that gives me something solid. And then, of course, it all takes time. And in between that, I had a few private consultations, which had to be done by Zoom, a lot of them, because that was around kind of the pandemic time and stuff like that. So from my experience, frustration at the time, I suppose, it was just like, it just felt like it was never ending because I was flip-flopping between my age and how many miscarriages. Should it be lowered? Absolutely. I will say very confidently, I believe that there shouldn't even be a number on it. I think people underestimate that a miscarriage is actually a death of a baby, and that should be taken incredibly seriously. So should it be lowered? Yes, I believe it should be, but that's coming from someone who's been stuck in that experience. The length of time it took us to get the diagnosis of the balanced translocation chromosome, do I look back at that and feel frustration? I can't carry that, Olly, because if I do, it enters into a whole deep web of regret would come into it, because it's like, should we have advocated for ourselves more? Should we have done more research? What's available? Should we have done this? It's the should we's conversations.
Yeah.
And it's not about me not wanting to unbox that and talk about it. It's just about having to balance up about moving forwards and trying to look at, now we have that information, what can we do with it, instead of regret of, I wish I knew that 8 years ago. Being a balanced translocation chromosome carrier, I could have got diagnosed at even 18 years old by that blood test, for example.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that for me is a takeaway, or what I'd like to be a takeaway from what we're trying to do, is that it's how can we reach people who are outside of the loss community? I'm sure there's a better word for it, but how can we get this knowledge into people's hands before they really need it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I was talking to Tom, who was on a few weeks ago, ran with us in Durham. His was an interesting podcast because he's
all about stats,
analytical. But he spoke about how him and his wife sort of straight away started to look at stuff like this, and that's, I think that's just who they are, or who Tom is, certainly. But I think it'd be so valuable for people to be able to have these options more readily available from the outset, because. And again, I don't want to start unboxing stuff that doesn't need to be, but you have had 4 miscarriages that you're aware of. There may have been, you had, like, sort of, as you said, a year period of time where you were trying to conceive. There may well have been pregnancies that were affected in that 12-month period that may have been affected by this chromosomal issue.
Absolutely.
That if with, as you say, quite a simple blood test at the outset could help people just to have an understanding of what's going on. So, but I guess it's also knowing what to test for, and you can't just test everyone for everything all the time, can you?
No, you can't, and that's a whole deeper conversation about obviously our healthcare system and private healthcare and finances and all of that. I think the awareness is what is out there if you want to do it, and I wasn't aware about it. And also, what's interesting, I suppose, if I was aware, would I even consider doing it anyway? So it's understanding what that, when the results come back, what information that would give you, and knowing what to do with that information. So yeah, it was interesting to find that out kind of at the end of shall we say, our kind of pregnancy losses, I suppose. But I can't, like I said, I have to learn not to hold on to that or push forward. I think what I would have really appreciated, maybe if I was doing Hindsight's a Wonderful Thing, is just understanding a bit more about fertility from a long time ago. I was aware, and my friends had experienced losses, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. You honestly don't think it's going to happen to you. The stats are there, and as your friend and fellow marathon runner Tom really pointed out, there's some really interesting stats, and they haven't improved over the years, of course. But yeah, I think because hopefully we go through life looking at the positives and thinking everything's going to really be okay, because otherwise what does that do to your mental health if you don't? But yeah, so I think it's sold to us that it can happen easily, that it's not expressed in mainstream film or TV. I think we're getting, the conversation is coming up, but we are in 2026. We should be having this conversation more regularly, which is why I think what you're doing and what I'm part of is so important.
Thank you. The other bit that you sort of touched on, and I know that you now do a lot of work and sort of advocation and support work on, is around navigating this process and IVF.
Yeah.
Which we've not spoken enormously about IVF and sort of what it entails in detail on the podcast so far, and we are doing that on a later episode. So we won't go too deep into that today. But what I'd love to hear more about is your sort of work around helping people to advocate for themselves during this process, whether it be pregnancy, miscarriage, IVF, all of which come with their own complexities. And I guess the obvious starting point there is the conversation that you had with your then, well, not even your new boss at that point. It doesn't sound like you've even started the role. Having to be very open and frank about your circumstances, which probably required going into the backstory a reasonable amount as well, with someone who you didn't know very well, and was a professional setting which comes with its own societal sort of preconceptions and whatnot. So maybe start with that conversation and how obviously well that seems to have gone, and how that's perhaps affected some of the stuff that you've done since.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, that was, that was a bit mad, wasn't it? Like, Nick, my partner, is just such an absolutely amazing support. I'm saying I've just had an embryo transfer. I find a job I really want to do when I'm away on holiday, celebrating my 40th. And then he's like, okay, go for it. So yeah, interviewed and all of that. So of course you don't have to declare it. So I didn't have to declare that I was pregnant before accepting the job. That was a personal choice that I made. Due to possibly deep down in my heart knowing about what had happened with my previous pregnancies. So I was coming from a place of hope that it wasn't going to. And again, similar to the fourth pregnancy, I was like really feeling it, I was really angry at Nick and eating so much toast and so many chips that I thought that it was going to be really positive. So I felt at time of accepting the role, I felt I wanted to be honest about it. Now, she won't mind me saying she was also heavily pregnant herself, and as a founder and owner of a franchise business. So I knew that I was going in with a bit of empathy in regards to that situation. And I don't know, I can't explain how it happened. I just knew deep down I really wanted to not declare it, maybe I did, but also, and yeah, just to explain that we were both, that because of her situation and her pregnancy and my pregnancy, that was going to happen, and there was going to be a clash of dates at some point of running a business. And she was amazing because it absolutely didn't falter her at all. So it was like, great, okay. And I think I'd already previously mentioned, I'd be lucky to have you for 6 months. I really want you to come on board. Let's get started. sadly, with the pregnancy ending in miscarriage, again, I was very straight up with her that I'd lost the pregnancy because I felt I had the confidence from the start, I think, because I'd said that. So I messaged her and let her know, and then my start date was agreed to put back. So not everyone's experience was, you have moments in life which are they are life-changing moments, not only experiencing a fifth pregnancy loss, which is life-changing in itself, but there's sometimes where people show extreme amounts of compassion and empathy that you will remember. And that put me on a path of understanding and really wanting to bring my coaching training into actually, how can I bring this to people, mainly women, but how can I bring this to people about having extended fertility, going through extended fertility journeys, but being confident in themselves about their own boundaries so they can still have a career that they desire and a family or a baby that they desire. How can those two work? So I started the role, and then early last year decided that I'd bring that to a social platform. How can I advocate? What's a really great way of being non-barrier to people? And I know that there's always barriers to social media. Some people don't have smartphones, access to internet and so forth, but it was a way that I felt that I could bring my mentoring and coaching experience with my personal experience and combine the two and really advocate for it. So particularly the focus on IVF, as that was a time where I had to ask for periods off work, because for us the clinic was a 2-hour drive, so appointments were a day or half a day at least.
Yeah.
And there was one point I went back to the clinic 3 times in a week. So it does affect you have to ask for flexibility. And how do you do that in a way that, if you want to be honest and declare it, that's great, but also how do you do that in a way if you don't want to talk about that you're going through fertility treatment?
Outside of the time off as well, there's just the wider IVF. Again, I said we'll go into this in more detail later week, but for those who aren't, IVF is a I would call it an incredibly aggressive.
It's brutal.
Treatment process. It's
brutal.
Yeah.
And if Nick was here, he would say that, he's never been told to F off as much in that period as it was. It completely transformed me in hormonally, where I was, how protective I felt over myself, my space, what I needed to happen. It's completely brutal, and it's something
which then in itself has an effect on your ability to work. Like, people will know just from you feeling a bit ill or you just having a bit of a shit day or whatever, that can affect your work. But this is sort of another layer
to
it.
And interestingly for me, for someone who does speak so openly, I didn't really, when I was in it, Olly, particularly in the injections prior to collection and transfer, funny enough, I didn't really share that much of it because you're just in it. And it's only now, even, what are we, kind of 18 months down the line, that kind of slowly I'm like, wow, this is it was big.
Yeah.
And I only went through that once.
Yeah.
You'll be speaking to people, and I know people who go through that and had go through that regularly, and it's a lot.
And so that your sort of IVF time was with the previous employer.
So my IVF time was with my previous employer, and again, they were very understanding. I had pre-booked, it just so happened that I pre-booked a week off around my 40th birthday anyway, and the way my treatment plan sorted it was that was going to be after the transfer. But actually I ended up taking a period extra time off, and especially that time where I had to go up 3 times in a week, I was just like, I can't even be in. So they were incredibly accommodating to that, and I chose to be very honest about what I was going through, and they were accommodating to that. So again,
is there any legislation around that? Because I know with pregnancy appointments, if you have a pregnancy appointment, you have to be given the time off work. But is there?
Yeah. So ACAS is a really good website if anyone wants to refer to it in the UK. Who's listening to this in the UK? So IVF appointments are classed as any medical appointment. So it's down to the discretion of your employer. So please check your contract and your employee's handbook because there might be, for instance, particularly in the handbook, outside of your contract, they might give you a certain amount of hours off for any medical appointment, which IVF is included in. So that means you don't have to make the time up, or it will be paid time off. But it doesn't have, where it does become employment law is once you've had your embryo transfer, you're classed as pregnant in the law. And that is when you're protected under pregnancy rights. But IVF appointments, even though they're elective, they're still classed as any medical appointment. So you just need to, you can just, so whatever, if they would let you go off to the GP or the dentist, then an IVF appointment is classed the same as that.
Yeah, okay. No, just as I
know
the answer, so.
I say that very confidently,
but then again, even looking at that, if you have an employer who's generally understanding around you going for a GP appointment, most people don't go to the GP 3 times a week for
exactly.
4 months or whatever. Do you know what
Absolutely.
I mean? And so there is perhaps then a further
and I think
which leads into the I probably cut you off earlier and you're sort of starting to talk about that side of what you've started doing with your mentoring and your
I think where I believe that what can help is having the confidence in knowing what boundaries you want to put in for yourself, and how do you prioritize yourself and your future family, as well as your career and what brings in the bills. And this affects the partners as well. Like, I wanted Nick with me at most of my appointments, and bearing in mind for us, location-wise, there is that drive included in that as well. So it's not like your local GP we talk about as often a small car journey away, isn't it? If you're in a town or even in a city, that you're usually living close by. Yeah, I'm very, one thing I do with my career coaching is kind of like when I do work with people who are going through a fertility experience, how can we look at that? How can we put boundaries in place and be confident enough to know that what you're advocating for yourself, but as in both directions, for your family, future family, but also for your future career. And from a personal perspective, my career growth started mainly when I was, in my 30s, all along this journey of the last 10 years being with Nick, of colliding with emotional and physical, mental kind of different levels of capacity throughout those years that I've had to balance as well.
I think it's phenomenal the work that you do, Alice. But we've spoken to a lot of people who are going through difficult times with losses and with IVF. But equally, just talking to friends who are pregnant and how that can be difficult with work and affects life and careers and everything. So it's this question of being or trying to be pregnant and trying to have a family is a really complex process to navigate, and so many people do it, but I can't see that it's easy for anyone.
No.
So having someone like you putting out the material that you do and the real genuine caring help and support that you do is fantastic.
Thank you. I think what's been really interesting, Olly, for me, and a discussion point for my friends and family I've talked about, is the videos that have gone kind of viral have been templates, have been conversation starters. How did I tell my boss I was going through IVF, word to word, copy my template, and how do I tell my colleague I don't want to go to her baby shower? And I've been surprised by this because, in a world where we have particularly AI now as well that can help us kind of write in a certain way.
Yeah.
That people want to hear from people's experiences and humans. Quite often my DMs have gone off because I always invite people, free of charge, I always invite people to reach out to me, and if they've got a specific thing or, because each person's situation is very different and unique. And the two things I've learned is, one is that we don't know how in demand it is. People still don't know how to talk to people about their fertility these days.
Yeah.
Number two is that it's a global thing. So people from Australia, America, everywhere it's the same thing that's going on. Fertility, and we mustn't forget, is a global issue, or infertility is as well, and how actually it's not just the UK. We've got to remember that we're all becoming a family wherever you live in the world is the same process, and actually it just affects everyone. But how in any country I've spoken to, to some people, that they still don't know how, they just need some help having the confidence to have those conversations.
And as ever, and it goes back to the point I was making earlier about trying to step outside of the realm of people who definitely need this sort of advice and awareness, it's how can you get, particularly around the points that you're making and the conversations that you're having, how can you make that more common knowledge?
Yeah.
So that instead of the person who's going through the shit bit having to worry about having an awkward conversation, let's make everyone else aware of how tough these times are, and therefore when someone comes to you to have a conversation about it, this is what they're going through and this is how difficult it is for them. So then you make the conversation easier by you as the individual can go in and completely butcher that conversation if you want, but it's going to be okay because the person on the other side has a more general awareness of what's going on and what you're going through.
And I think that's really interesting. So because the other side to it is the education that companies need to do as well, and what line managers need to do. Now, there's some amazing companies out there, large companies that have incredible fertility and IVF policies, but it's all very well me working with maybe individuals to get their own confidence and mindset right, but actually the bigger work, which I'd love to get involved in now in the future, is actually the double prong attack, is actually working with the large companies or small companies, but the management level, just to look at that empathy and compassion piece to make it easier for people to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So it's multi-layered to go into, but I think a start is to actually learn how to advocate for ourselves as we're in control of what we want, and then kind of, like I said, there's that extra piece coming in, and there's some amazing charities out there already changing that process and doing that work. But yeah, it's a conversation that we'll need to continue, and hopefully we'll get louder and louder and louder over the next few years.
You mentioned charities.
Yes.
Tommy's is obviously the one that we are running for and advocating for this year, although there's many others that dip in and out. You obviously, as with pretty much anyone we talk to around this, have had a very positive experience with Tommy's and how they're able to help and support people going through very difficult times. You ran the London Marathon for them in 23, which was sort of your first fundraising.
It was.
For them. And you've decided you want to do another marathon, so it must have gone all right.
The London Marathon was the best day of my life. Olly, you ever run it? You're running it.
I'm doing it this year with
I can't wait to come and cheer you on, because so it even gives me goosebumps talking about it. I think there's reasons to that. There was incredibly, as there is for this marathon and for my other fundraising, I also did 5k a day for Tommy's in 2024, just as my 4th miscarriage finished, which was an amazing experience, but equally tiring. Small distance, but each day it kind of accumulates. So London Marathon was healing in many ways, kind of come off the back of 4 losses, I think, by then. Was kind of in this in-between break. We're trying to do the testing, and then also I felt like I needed a bit break, although training for a marathon isn't really a break. It was like my first, outside of my friends and family, who I've always been quite honest with, was the first kind of like, this is our story and this is like what's been happening. So everyone was like, oh, okay. And I got such an amazing response from sharing that, that it was really positive. And then the training went well. The day itself was just incredible. And I remember watching a little video a few weeks afterwards from a guy who just said, for 35 years, I thought the London Marathon was a sporting event. How wrong could I be?
Yeah.
It is about the best of humankind. It is so much more than running. We went up last year to support a friend who was running for a different charity as a spectator. I didn't get up the 2024, got up last year. To see it on the other side, it was totally like finished. And I thought, if those hundreds of thousands of people who were standing at the side of the road, Olly, who were complete strangers to me, but I could hear my name every time I took a step, I could hear my name. I thought, if that was the life that we had these cheerleaders just cheering us on every day, like what an amazing world this could be. It's like, it's just the best of, it really was the best of humanity.
And it really is addictive. I've been to watch, I've not run it, but I've been to watch when Amy and I were living down in London.
Yeah.
Having never been before, and we just sort of got to the route and found ourselves at a spot on the pavement, and I just started shouting people's names, and it's so addictive. And I sat there for 2 hours.
Yeah. It was just amazing.
Cheering people by, and it was a phenomenal.
He absolutely summed it up for me. So I always remember my friends like recorded me on like BBC iPlayer, like crossing the finish line. You know, when you come round the corner, kind of heading towards like St James's Park. I always thought I was going to be up there, you know, striding along, kind of like hands up in the air. And I remember just seeing myself like shoulders slogging over the line. But I was really happy with it. My main aim was not only to raise money and awareness, but was also from a personal, physical side, was also to run the whole thing, which I did in between stopping at the cheer stations and giving my family the most amazing hugs.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I just didn't stop running. In some ways, I wish I ran it slower, just so you can enjoy it. So my tip for you this year, Olly, not that you'll be speeding around, as it will probably be, your 16th, 17th, 18th marathon?
18, I think that one is.
Just run it slowly. Enjoy every moment of it. Like, it's still 26.
That'll be music to Charlie's ears. I think he's a bit worried about.
Charlie, don't worry. It's okay. Just run slowly. It's still 26.2 miles with whatever time you do it in, but that was great. And then,
so our trip along the Dorset coast is going to be similar to running the London Marathon. We're going to have
just
people
long
cheering us every step of the way.
I'll have to get my mum to follow us on her bike or something.
Yeah.
So this will be my third challenge for Tommy's. Quickly followed up 2 weeks later with the London Landmarks half marathon for Tommy's, which will be my fourth challenge. I think I'll probably find a fifth just for the symbol of our 5 losses as well. So that's to be announced.
Yeah. So what do we tell us about our day in Dorset? Where are we going to be?
Dorset.
What are we going to be doing? Who's coming? What are we up to?
Who's coming? What's going on? So I'm lucky to live in a lovely town called Bridport in Dorset, so close to the coast and close to the countryside. We'll be starting, it's going to be a very local route because I wanted to be able to open it up to as many people as possible, and generally my community is around this area. So we're going to be starting at an amazing place called Symondsbury Estate, where I used to actually work, which is about 5 minutes away from where I live, where we can obviously fill ourselves up with coffee beforehand if needed as well. The route's going to take us winding through kind of West Dorset villages, takes in nature out to Powerstock Common, comes back, and then we're running towards the coast, Olly. So we're going to take in the Jurassic Coast while we're here as well, and then we run back through the fields back to Symondsbury. So it's one big loop of West Dorset. Who's coming? Well, still to be announced. I don't think, Olly, we're going to have a lot of people running the full marathon. We have a lot of people that are going to be doing at least probably half. I've given starting points on the information on the website about when people can join us. There seems to be a lot of hands up for the last Okay, that sounds.
It always is. Those glory hunters. They know people take photos at the finish. That's why. I was there. I knew the game.
The biggest announcement is that Nick is actually joining us for the last 5K. He's not a runner at all, and he's also signed up for the half marathon in
Norfolk.
In Norfolk for the last one. So that might be his 5th challenge for Tommy. So I'm really super. We're going to run it together, which will be amazing for us. We've done
awesome.
Funny, which is kind of symbolic, but not. But actually, the first and the only race he's ever done, which was a 10K in the New Forest, was in 2019 when we just found out I was pregnant. So that will be, it's taken him nearly 8 years again to actually do a run with us. But yeah, he's going to be doing the last 5K, which is great. So I think we will have a crowd, but we're probably not going to have someone with us apart. So you're going to have to put up with me the whole time. But we are going to have also family, mainly my mum, doing 3 aid stations along the way. So I think we're going to have a chocolate cake available to us as well.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we're actually coming down en masse. We're actually going to Amy's auntie's 60th birthday in Litton Cheney.
Yeah. Listen to me. Yeah.
Just up the road. So we'll be fairly mob-handed that weekend as well. So we'll bring some support of our own. But no, I've no doubt it's going to be a fantastic day out. Something we haven't actually spoken about on the podcast, which I should, is that Norfolk weekend.
Yes, let's tell everyone about it.
It's our last marathon, hopefully. I hope I haven't got any to make up or something by the time I get to that point. But it's the last weekend. It's my sort of home marathon. I grew up in Norfolk and spent a lot of time along the Norfolk coast. So we're running the Norfolk Coastal Path Marathon, but they also do a half marathon on the same day, which starts halfway along the marathon course. It's an A to B. So it starts halfway along and we all finish in the same place. I think so far we've got about 25 people that are entered from the sort of Marathons for Miracles community, and friends and family of mine that haven't necessarily joined us along the way, and people like yourself who are going to be repeat offenders the year. So if anyone's been listening regularly and wants to come along and run the marathon or run the half or just support, it'd be great to see as many people there as possible, and we're having a big party at the White Horse in Brancaster Staithe afterwards, which will be...
I'm basically going for the party, Olly.
Yeah. I think a lot of... some people are just coming for the party.
It was your lovely wife, Amy, that put out on the group that she was going to do the half marathon, and I was like, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it again as well. So I'm sorry I can't join you. I just can't mentally think about doing another marathon training block. But
I think it would be so nice for us to sort of get onto that half marathon course ourselves and know that at some point we're going to start bumping into
it would be great
lots of pink shirts and
exactly along the way, and then lots of celebrations afterwards. We wouldn't want to miss it. So, but interestingly, I signed up, and then I said to Nick, we're going away for the weekend, I've signed up to the half, thinking he wasn't going to, and he was like, no, I'm going to do it. So he signed up quickly as well.
Well, if you're listening, be more like Nick. And
be more like Nick.
Sign up as well. We'll put the entry link in the show notes.
Yeah.
So
just don't be like Nick fainting at blood test. Be more like Nick signing up to half marathon.
Excellent. But yes, before then, Dorset to do, and as we said, week 14, so a long way to go before Norfolk, but we are getting there. But Alice, it's been a pleasure talking to you, which doesn't surprise me at all. I've been looking forward to this one and very much looking forward to our weekend in Dorset.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. Hopefully the rain will stop for you by then, but if not, we're going to have to do it anyway.
So far, so long may that last. Thank you again for speaking so openly about your experiences. I know, as you said, it doesn't necessarily get easier, but we know from feedback that we've had for this podcast how much it's helping people who are listening. So do genuinely really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for giving me the time and allowing me to be part of this amazing challenge and awareness. It's such a nice community that you're building around us as teammates as well. So thank you to you and Amy for doing it all.
Very welcome. And we'll see you very soon.
Take care. Bye, Olly.